My name is Peter DeGraziano. I'm an optometrist and a member of the International Academy of Low Vision Specialists. I practice in San Diego County, California, and I work with patients with different types of vision loss. In doing so, we use a lot of different tools to help our patients. Today we're going to be talking about one of these tools, low vision glasses, and it's a very interesting topic that people don't know a lot about. So to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about the eye, how it works, what it sees, where it has problems, and what we can do to help with these sorts of problems. It's important to know before we get started that this type of help, it's not something that we just reach and hand a patient off the shelf. It takes 10 or 15 minutes on the phone to talk to a patient to see if I think they can be helped with these types of aids. And then when they come in the office to work with me, it's about an hour and a half, 2-hour exam to really come up with something for the patient. So we're going to talk about the glasses themselves, but keep in mind you do need to connect with a low vision doctor, somebody familiar with these types of aids to really have success with these types of devices. So what is low vision? I think that if this wasn't an internet conversation, if we were here in person, people would ask questions and maybe shout out answers like 2400, 2200, 2100, maybe 2040. In fact, we don't think of low vision as having a certain number. It's not defined by a loss of acuity. It's defined by a loss of function. So if your best corrected vision is insufficient to do what you want to do, we call that low vision. Examples of low vision include difficulty reading, driving, watching TV. Those are the biggest three that I hear all the time. The driving is your independence, reading and TV are your entertainment and your news, but lots of other symptoms that people might have. They might have problems with the phone, problems on the computer, problems writing checks, signing on the line, seeing the numbers, the amount the check was made out for, in the kitchen seeing stove dials, reading recipes, maybe recognizing people's faces or recognizing people in photographs. These are all different types of examples of problems people might have with low vision. It's important to know that there is always help available. That's the most important thing that I'll say here today. And there's always help available for people with vision loss. When possible, we'd like it to be visual help. That comes in the form of all kinds of devices, magnifying devices, electronic devices, virtual reality, low vision glasses. And of course today we're talking about the low vision glasses, but it also comes in the form of non-visual help. So now we're talking about things like audiobooks, counseling services, peer workshops, lighting assessments, technology training, learning how to use some of the digital devices you have or could have, iPads, Kindles, vocational training, optimization of the home environment. And it's important to know these types of services are available, and they can be very impactful for people and can really help, particularly when it comes to depression and anxiety, which we know are big factors. They're strongly linked to vision loss in older adults, and it's something you don't have to go through alone. There's a lot of resources that help. The Braille Institute, for instance, is a fantastic resource for many of these services. Well, let's start off with what the eye sees. And the most common comparison I tend to hear is the eye-camera comparison. I think we picked this up somewhere in grade school, and we imagine our eye works just like a camera. So let's explore that a little bit. And what I've drawn above the picture of the camera and the eye are supposed to be cross-sections cut through. So the light will be entering on the left side, and it will be focused on the right side of each of these diagrams. So both the eye and the camera have some sort of adjustable aperture to control the amount of light going into the device. They have a lens to focus that light, and then it has to be focused somewhere and captured, so it's captured by some sort of photosensitive material. In the case of the camera, it's the film, and in case of the eye, it's the retina. And interestingly, you can see in these pictures perhaps that the blue that depicts the film of the camera is much smaller than the blue that depicts the retina in the eye, the film of the eye. And that's going to come into play in just a minute here. as we look at the differences between the eyes and the camera. But first, let's start with the field of view of the camera. A normal camera may have something like a 35 to 45 degree field of view. And that's part of the art of photography, is we're cropping the world in an aesthetically pleasing way. The eye, on the other hand, with both eyes open, you see a full 180 degrees around you. Now when you get all the way over to the left or all the way over to the right, you're going to be monocular, you're only using one eye. But for most of this visual field, both eyes are active and helpful. Now when you look at the camera, the film of the camera has the same detail at every point. So the spot all the way up in the left, the person's head, compared to the center, compared to the lower right, everything has the same resolution. Everything has the same color. It's all the same. This is not the way the eye works. In the eye, the central 10 degrees is what sees best. This is mediated by part of the eye called the macula. And in the very center of the macula, there's the fovea. These are the parts of the eye that sees 20/20. As we start to move away from that 10 degrees, that central 10 degrees, the vision starts to get worse. And as we go peripherally, the vision drops to about 2200. So what would that look like in a picture? I attempted to draw it here, I attempted to depict it here using a photo program, and it didn't come out that well, but the idea is the boy's head in the center is supposed to be clear. And as you move towards the periphery of the page, that's supposed to be fuzzier, simulating that blurrier 2200 type vision. So the camera, the camera on your phone maybe, is about 12 megapixels. Compare that to the center of the human eye, that central 10 degrees. Researchers estimate the vision there, if it was measured in megapixels, to be about 576 megapixels. So 576 in the center of the eye compared to 12 megapixels in your camera. That's a huge difference, and it's an awful lot of information for the eye to deal with. And so most of that information, again, is coming from the central 10 degrees. Now with the camera, it's the same sort of receptor everywhere on the film. So it's recording exactly the same stuff in exactly the same detail. In the eyes, we have two different types of receptors. We have rods and we have cones. Now the rods are located in the periphery and the mid-periphery, and they see in black and white. They don't see in color. They see blurry. They see about 2200, and they're good for picking up gross shapes, not gross like yuck, but large shapes and movement. Very sensitive to movement. The cones, on the other hand, are distributed somewhat the opposite. We have lots of cones in the center of the vision, and this is what mediates that sharp vision that we have, that 20/20 vision, and colors. And so in folks that have had damage to their central vision, for instance, macular degeneration, they will notice that central blur, and in addition, they may notice that colors seem more muted. So now we know where things can go wrong in the eye. If it happens centrally, that's going to cause one type of effect. If it happens peripherally, it's going to have a different type of effect. So let's look at those. First, centrally, here this boy, pictured on the left-hand side, you can see all the details in his face. And moving over to the right-hand side, his eye, his nose, and his mouth are covered by a small defect, blind spot that we would call a scotoma, a blind spot. And so that's one type of problem we can have centrally. Of course, we can have problems peripherally also. And so peripheral problem might look a little bit more like this. This is this classic tunnel vision that you tend to hear about. And here, the picture on the left, we have this nice full picture. And on the right, we have the peripheral visual field constricting inwards and a lot of loss of information. Examples here would be glaucoma and retinitis pigmentosa, these diseases that usually start from the outside of the vision, work their ways in towards the middle. And you can imagine all the information being lost here about the periphery, causing a lot of problems with mobility, bumping into things, tripping on things, being surprised by things suddenly appearing in front of you where they were out of view before. And so peripheral field loss. This other type of field loss here is an example of a stroke-related defect, and not all stroke-related defects look so pronounced, but you can see that half of the visual field is gone in this case. All the information on the left-hand side, which contained the people, is gone. And so that's another type of vision loss. Sometimes with stroke-related defects, it's not nearly as pronounced. It might be a little section, not that entire half that's missing, and sometimes it's problematic, and sometimes it's not, depending on where that section is. But that's an example of another type of field loss. So we see the different types of field loss, we've categorized them into groups, and we really need to come up with some solutions now. How can low vision glasses help with these sorts of things? So what can the goals be? I think that for cases of central vision loss, what we need to do is to increase the image size, and oftentimes that's very impactful. So if you look at the picture of the boy there, you see again that blind spot, that scotoma, covering his eye, his nose, and his mouth. And what we've done is we've enlarged, in this next picture, the boy, the image, by 2 times. So he's twice as large, but importantly, that scotoma, that blind spot, is exactly the same size as before. So we're increasing the image size, but that blurry part, that part that's giving us trouble, does not change in size. And therefore, it has less of an impact on the image. So now you can see the details on the boy's face, his eyes, his nose, his mouth. And that same strategy is done for reading, where initially maybe some of the letters are difficult to see because of blur or blind spots or maybe distortions. Again, by increasing the size of the letters but keeping the size of the defects the same, we can accomplish a lot more. Decreasing the image size. We want to do this in cases, this is one of the strategies, in cases of tunnel vision, in case of peripheral field loss. And here we have that same picture of the boy in that tunnel vision on the left-hand side. And by decreasing the image size by about 20%, we have a lot of extra information included in this second picture. You can now see the man that's with him, who happens to be me. You can see the umbrella over top. You can see that those people are now standing in a line, not standing and having a picnic under an umbrella. And so a lot more information is there. Obviously, that's important for mobility, getting around, being able to see the environment. And something to note here is that as we make things smaller, a person really has to have good center vision to take advantage of this kind of device. Because if we're shrinking things down onto a bad portion of the retina, then we're not doing them any favors. Shifting the image location. This is another interesting one, and in this case, this was the picture we had taken of the stroke victim. All of the information on the left-hand side is lost. We have certain types of glasses that will allow us to shift some of this lost information over to the good retina to give us an idea of what's happening peripherally on that left-hand side. And so it gives us an earlier cue that you need to turn your head and look and see what's happening on the left-hand side, and it's very helpful to patients oftentimes. In addition to these techniques, we always try to maximize the image quality, and that oftentimes requires use of different types of filters and prescriptions and prisms. And here's an example of 3 filters that I just took a picture of that I've used in my office before, but I have many, 50 or 75 different filters that are used for different things, and filters can be extremely impactful. So that's another piece of the low vision glasses puzzle. And now I think after running through what we've run through, what low vision is, how the eye works, where we can have the problems, and the strategies that we're going to use to address these problems, then we can move on to actually demonstrating the different types of glasses and talking about them, and that's what we'll do next. Okay, this is part 2 of low vision glasses, and in this part I'm going to demonstrate and discuss some of these different types of glasses. Some of them are very unusual looking, and some of them look a little more like regular glasses, but I'll talk about what they do and what they don't do well, and we'll also talk about who the glasses are for, what kind of people would benefit from the glasses. And let me address that last one now. These glasses that I'm going to show you are all for people that have central vision loss, and I've chosen this particular subset of aids because I have a lot of patients that come to me with macular degeneration. It's so prevalent, and I suspect a lot of people watching this probably are interested in hearing about that as well. And so those are the ones I'm going to discuss today. So there are, of course, and I talked about this in the slideshow, different areas where you can have the vision loss. You can have peripheral vision loss, you can have central vision loss, and then there's this group of other types of vision loss. Or you could have problems in multiple areas. But today I'm going to specifically address, with the glasses, central vision loss. And the other thing I want to point out again before we get started, and this was mentioned at the beginning of the video, is that these are not over-the-counter solutions. This is the type of thing that somebody who's very familiar with these types of glasses needs to work with you, assess your vision, see where you need the help, and customize glasses for you. Typically, my exams with patients take about an hour and a half to 2 hours to really design appropriate device to find out if something like that would be impactful and to design the device. So connect with somebody who works with these sorts of devices if you think something like this would be beneficial for you. Okay, that said, when a patient comes to me and has problems with central vision loss and has a goal of being able to see better up close, to see small print or to read, then one of the first things we might try would be just a stronger reading glass. So this is stronger than your average reading glasses that you would get from your regular eye doctor. And in fact, as I get close here, you can see how big that makes my eye look when I drop the glass down. So that's good. It's giving you a lot of magnification, and of course that's the goal. The trade-off for that level of magnification is the working distance. The stronger that I make the glasses, the closer you're going to have to get to things when you read. So now I'm getting in on the focal distance. The focal distance is right about there, so pretty close, but at this range I can see things very well. Another example of glasses of this sort is these, and it's the same sort of design. You can see that things look bigger through the glasses for you, and of course the same for me. When I look through these glasses, things look much bigger for me. The focal distance on this one is a little bit further away, so maybe about here. So what we see is, as we're increasing the power for these reading glasses, we're having to get closer and closer together. So the glasses are built with something that allows you to converge the eyes better when you see. Why is that important? When you look out here at the distance, your eyes are pointed straight ahead. And when you look to read, your eyes have to turn in to converge on the target. When you have your regular reading glasses on, the ones you've worn for most of your life, you've been out here maybe 16 inches away and reading comfortably, and the eyes have to turn in just a little bit to do that. When you put on a very strong pair of reading glasses, you have to hold things very close in order to see well, and the eyes must converge a lot more to do that. And that's beyond the extent of what your eye can do comfortably. So something has to be built into the glasses to help the eye to do that, and that's why they have kind of this funny looking shape. And the same thing with this one here. So what happens if we need to make it stronger yet? Maybe the level of vision loss is such that we need even more magnification than those can provide. Then we can try something a little bit different. This is called a microscope, and I'm going to close my left eye so you can really see the level of magnification on the right. And it's much larger, much more powerful than the devices we were just looking at. My eye probably looks about twice as large as it did a moment ago. And this is several lenses. You can see the circle there. There are several lenses built into that circle in order to achieve the desired visual effect. The working distance is extremely close, so it's right there. At this range, with this lens, it's beautiful edge to edge. So the field of view is fantastic. The distance is very short. The level of magnification is very high. So as you can imagine, that can be difficult to adapt to. everything here, there's some level of adaptation that has to happen. But with this one, that very short working distance can be a challenge when you get to higher and higher powers. And in order to combat that, what we can do is we can combine other types of magnification to help out. So we had this one type of magnification that we've been working with. Telescopes are another type of magnification, and we combine the telescope with the microscope to get a telemicroscope. We're able to get a larger image size at a longer distance than we could previously. So we're going to get longer working distances with these, and this is where the devices start to look a little bit funny. So that's an example of a telemicroscope. This is it straight on, and if I put it on, you can see as I angle you there that my eye does look larger through these, just like it did through the other devices. However, this device has about a 13-inch working distance, which is far enough that it's probably off my screen. I'm going to bring it in just a little bit to give you an idea. And these can be customized to any distance, but keep in mind, as I angle them, as I position the reading material further and further away and focus for those further distances, the level of magnification is going to go down. So if I build this to focus right here, it's going to be much bigger than if I build it to focus out here. However, some things just can't happen here. So computer use is very difficult here. Things like playing the piano, different types of household tasks, writing, for example, you're going to want to be further away. And so something like this can help achieve the same level of magnification at a longer working distance versus some of the previous devices we looked at. Or it can achieve a higher level of magnification at the same working distance. So it's an interesting device. Another example of a telemicroscope is going to be something like this. This is a big lens, so people will look at this and probably be shocked by how large it looks. Looks like something that Mr. Magoo would wear, I guess. And the focal distance on something like this is going to be, with this level of microscope attached to it, it's going to be about there. But what's interesting with this device is the microscope is detachable. And different microscopes can be attached. So by changing different microscopes, I can change the working distance. So with this one, the microscope, like I said, is very close. However, if I change the power in the microscope, just by putting on a different cap, I now focus much further away. So it's kind of a cool device because in low vision, devices generally do one thing well. This one, because we can change the microscope caps on it, can do several things well, but it involves changing the caps around. When you don't have any caps on, the device can be aimed and focused for a specific distance, and commonly people will want this focused for television. So I will aim it for television, I'll find out how far their television is away, I'll aim it for television, and then when they want to read or see up close, I'll have them take the device off and push a cap on one side, put it back on, and now it becomes a reading device. So that's kind of a cool level of flexibility. It's a big device, and most people do okay with the weight. Sometimes people will say to me, gosh, this is heavy, but when they see the level of vision change, if it is impactful and helpful for them, that's generally enough to compensate for the heavier lens. However, if we need to, we can go lighter on a lens. But if we go lighter, something's going to give. So in this case, this is the same level of magnification. I don't have any reading caps on it right now. I love the vision through this. It's beautiful, but the field of view is much smaller. So when I look through these, I'm very aware of the telescope housings. So it's that spotlight kind of view now. Whereas with these other larger lenses, they're heavier, but the view is much, much wider, almost 30 degrees with this, which is really fantastic. Now switching to a stronger telescope is going to also constrict that field of view. So this one has a higher power in it, which means just like when I went with the smaller telescope design, it's going to be a little bit more zoomed in. You're not going to have that same wider field of view. So when I go from a lower powered telescope to a higher powered telescope, it's going to zoom in and things will be larger, but you won't see as wide of an area. And that's what's going to happen with something like this. And you can continue to increase the power, and of course that effect will continue. So this is an example of a very small telescope that happens to be about 3 times enlargement. And when I put this over the top, for instance, if I use it for driving, I would be able to see street signs from about 3 times the distance I could with my regular glasses. But the field of view on it will be narrow, so you'll just be able to see a small area. You can make it wider with a larger scope, and you can see how much bigger this scope is. And this scope built into the glasses will expand the view a little bit, and they're the same power again. However, dropping the power down a little bit into a scope something like this at the top of the glasses opens things up and gives you a little bit more field of view. And so tinkering and finding the correct amount of magnification for a patient to be comfortable is really critical. And I'm mentioning putting this power at the top of the glasses. I want to show you what that looks like. This is a pair of telescopes that is used for driving and for walking around in mobility. So with this telescope, you'll notice right away that while I'm looking at you, I'm not looking through the telescopes, I'm looking at the lens, looking through the lens below the telescopes. And that's the way this device is used 90% of the time. So you're almost always looking through the regular lens, which is customized with your prescription. And if something needs to be seen better in the distance, all you do is you drop your chin down a little bit and it zooms in. So for instance, if somebody was using something like this for driving an automobile, they would be driving through the regular lens. You'd have your rear view mirror and your side view mirrors in the car that you would turn and check when you need it. And then if you needed to see something ahead of you better, like there's a street sign coming up and you can't see it, you can dip your chin downward, and once you get into the scope, it will be as if you've gotten several times closer to that sign. So you look at it, and then you lift back up and go back to the regular glass and continue. So it's a spotting device when it's put in this position, not a device you're going to be looking through all the time. But because it's up and out of the way, the device can be safely used for driving and for mobility, so walking around. So if you were in the grocery store and there's a sign in one of the aisles and you need to see it, you just tilt down a little bit to see the sign, look at it, and tilt back up again. Same thing with the street sign, same thing with walking. If you're walking and there's a rise in the pavement or a person coming towards you and you can't quite make out who it is or what it is, you would get it into focus through the regular lens first and then drop the chin down and they would come in much larger. Identify what it is and then lift it back up again. So as you can imagine, this sort of device takes some training because we want those head movements to become unconscious movements. We don't want somebody to be in a car thinking, okay, now how do I get into the telescope? How do I get out of the telescope? So there's a number of steps to practice using the device, to master the device before you take it on the road. So this device is a mobility device. One of the disadvantages is going to be that cosmetically it has the scopes on it. So if you're using it for mobility, of course, people are going to see it. So you'd have to be okay with that. And the scope on the top is not going to be a huge scope. It's not going to be like this scope that we looked at before that gives this ultra wide field of view. This scope here is smaller and is just for spotting. Going back to this device that we discussed before, this device, I didn't mention, you can't walk around in it. So when you get up to do something, you need to take them off. The reason is when you're looking through the telescopes, your depth perception is going to be altered, and you're not going to be able to see well. You're not going to be able to make corners, turn corners well. You're not going to be able to grab things with your hands well. And when you're walking, you're more likely to trip on objects because it does alter your depth perception. So again, it's not safe to walk in this device. This device is for stationary use. And if we put them at the top, they can be used for mobility. If we put them on the bottom, they can be used for reading. And you've probably seen loupes before, which are of that design, where they're put on the bottom and the regular distance prescription is put on the top. And with this, you would have some level of mobility as well. So there's a lot of customizations that can happen. That's just a few of them. But telescopes and some of these reading glasses can be tremendously impactful for patients. I do get patients who come to me all the time, and they're shocked that something like this exists and how much it's helpful. So everybody's different. Not everybody can be helped with these sorts of designs. But for macular degeneration patients in general, we've been very successful. And I think that just knowing that these sorts of devices out there will be helpful to at least some of the people watching this video. And I'm going to move on to a couple of commonly asked questions. The first thing that people ask me at the end of the exam is, does it have to look like that? The vision's great, I'll take it, but does it have to look like that? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. Telescopes, you've seen probably astronomical telescopes, the ones they look at the stars with. There's a certain separation between the objective lens and the ocular lens, and that needs to be there. So these big astronomical telescopes, they're usually long tubes, and the same has to be true for these little telescopes. They have to be a tube. There has to be a space between the first lens and the second lens, and that's the reason they all protrude like this. So they're of varying size, and they must all protrude for that sort of design. Another one I get is my prescription going to be in there? Yes. If there's a prescription, it can be placed in both the telescope in the regular glasses lens, and prescriptions can also be customized here in the microscope cap. How long does it take to make telescopic lenses and custom low vision glasses? Typically, it takes about a month, maybe a little more, a little bit less, but there are very few places that make them. They are custom, and they do take a while. It's not a quick procedure to make something like this. Surprisingly, there's a lot of math involved in telescopes that you wouldn't think about just by looking at it. So they do take about a month. As far as other questions, I'm trying to think what else might be a common question that people want to know. Price is probably a big one, and I'll tell you, anything with a telescope is going to be more expensive. Telescopes can run in the thousands depending on what's done. The other types of glasses, some of these reading glasses are much less. So let me just go ahead and review some of these so you can see them one last time. We started off with just a stronger pair of reading glasses, which would be something like this, which made it bigger and closer. And then we moved on to higher powered glasses that help with reading. And that made it bigger yet and closer yet. And at this point, things started to get maybe prohibitively close. And we had to come up with a way to make things further away and more comfortable. And we started to combine a telescope technology with microscopes and came up with telemicroscopes. So these glasses are an example of that and give a much longer working distance. So I'm able to hold things much further away. All of those things can be customized. Again, I point out that when we customize to get more of one thing, something else is going to be sacrificed. So if we want it to be a little further out, then maybe we're going to sacrifice the field of view or the amount of magnification in the lens. But something, as we tweak this, will have to be sacrificed. In order to get one thing, we always have to sacrifice a little bit of something else. So it's a bit of an art, and it's something that's done with the patient for an hour or 2 hours to really flesh out what's going to work best for them and satisfy their goals. I hope that answers everybody's questions. You're always welcome to reach out to me, and I'm going to post the number for both the Braille Institute and the International Academy of Low Vision Specialists. The latter is a group of low vision specialists in the United States and Canada, and this group does a lot of work with telescopic glasses. So depending on what state you're in, if you're interested in help of this sort, you can always look at that list and find help through them. Okay, thank you for allowing me to be here, and thanks for listening to this presentation.